Today I'm going to start a new series on golf. It's going to be about the myths in golf. I did something similar in German because I teach in Germany. It was a series with over 24 parts and it was quite successful, so I thought, why not do the same thing in English? Although English is not my native tongue, as you can tell. The first part is going to be about the myth that forearm rotation closes the club face. You can encounter this myth on every driving range, probably every day, when someone maybe teaches his friend who slices the ball, and sooner or later he will demonstrate shots or swings like this and wants to tell his friend, you have to rotate your forearms more or earlier or both so that the club face closes so that you can get rid of your slice. Unfortunately, the forearm rotation, which closes the club face, has some side effects which you don't want to have, and I would like to explain those. First of all, if you have an impact where your forearms and your shaft are absolutely in one line, then it would be possible to rotate the forearms and to just close the club face without any side effects. But since we have an angle between the forearm and the shaft at impact, forearm rotation does more than just close the club face. And you can see that, for example, if I demonstrate over here, if I rotate my forearms now, the shaft becomes steeper or shallower depending on the direction of the forearm rotation. And for example, if someone now tries to get rid of his slice by rotating his forearms more, he will usually start somewhere over here, because after this point it really gets quick. Then you can see his shaft is going to get outside the line and he will probably hit the outside of the golf ball, and then he will have pull hooks, so balls that are starting to the left and curving further to the left. And as John Jacobs used to say, you need a lot of golf course on the left for this shot. So that's what you don't really want to have happening in your golf swing. The other side effect of forearm rotation is easy to understand. If I, for example, take an impact position which is neutral, and if I don't do anything else now but rotate my forearms, you can see that my club head overtakes the hands. And if I want to bring the club head now back to the ball, because this wouldn't be a good impact position, without re-rotating, I need to pull it back, and then you can see that the club head is in front of the hands at impact, and then you will have thin shots, fat shots, and not really nice draws where you hit the ball first and ground afterwards, or at least at the same time. And if I demonstrate a swing now where I rotate my forearms really much, you can see that usually this will happen, that you don't get in a position where your hands are in front of the ball. So what's the secret here? The important thing is to realize that when you bow your left wrist, you can close the club face almost without any side effects. If I demonstrate this over here, and you can see if I cup my left wrist, the club face opens. If I bow my left wrist, the club face closes. And of course, you don't want to overdo it. If, for example, someone has a cupped wrist, he can, of course, straighten his left wrist until it gets straight, and then he should at least slice less. But it's not a guarantee that he's going to hit straight balls if his left wrist is flat over here. He needs to have it at least flat or even bowed at impact. So this is the answer to the question, what really happens when, for example, a good player demonstrates a good impact. What he does is he not only rotates his forearms, but he rotates his forearms and at the same time he bows his left wrist. And if I demonstrate this with a club, you can see that I'm able to close the club face and even get my hands further in front of the ball, as opposed to a swing where I do just forearm rotation and I will always end up coming from the outside or being in the ground in front of the ball. So that's the first myth, and I hope my explanation will help you to understand why the ball slices, what you have to do to fix your slice, which means you need to rotate your forearms more, bow your left wrist at the same time, and especially you need to understand that the two things correlate, because if, for example, your club gets too steep over here, you will have a hard time getting your left wrist in a straight or bowed position, because you can understand the relationship between the two if you, for example, try to exaggerate it in your backswing. For example, if you try to make your club as steep as possible by forearm rotation, you will, after a while, see that your left wrist will cup automatically, because it's just too tough for a human to do this kind of movement, to steepen the shaft and keeping the left wrist straight, or even bowing it. I can demonstrate this because I'm extremely flexible, but if you try to do it, you will see it's almost impossible. And the same thing applies to the opposite. If you, for example, flatten your shaft, you will see after a while your left wrist will get into a bowed position automatically, because it's really tough for the right wrist to keep the left wrist cupped, then lay the club off, and now you can see it's almost impossible for your right hand. So there's a tendency that a club that gets too flat will usually bow your left wrist, and a club that gets too steep will usually cup your left wrist. So if someone tries to rotate his forearms, usually the club gets too steep, then the left wrist will cup and he opens the club face again. So you better concentrate more on your left wrist, which should be straight, and not so much about forearm rotation. Even if you have too little forearm rotation, you might end up getting too much from the inside to the ball. But if your left wrist is straight, you get nice balls that are starting to the right and curling back to the left, and this is called a draw.